internally speaking, Theodore Roosevelt, was very active and enthusiastic adherent to progressive ideology and progressive trend or tendencies or reforms. Where do you see this? You see this for example, in his environmental, in his attitude towards the environment and national parks. It is something that had already started in the Gilded Age era, but Roosevelt is going to be an enthusiastic supporter for protecting the environment. And what does protecting nature, protecting forests, trees and parks, building this national park system, what does this mean for a progressive movement? We said that the progressive movement is based on the attempt to limit or to minimize the damages of industrialization and urbanization and technological development on society and on the world in general. One of these damages is the destruction of the natural habitat and the environment. And Roosevelt was a very active supporter of this policy, environmental policy, where the government takes the responsibility of protecting certain natural habitats from being destroyed or invaded by industry, by urbanization, and so on. He was also in favor of his progressive policy is also seen in his attitude towards labor conflicts. How does Roosevelt act vis-a-vis labor conflicts? He acts as an arbitrator, okay? He tries to make the government, including himself, the president, the executive branch, an arbitrator between the two sides, labor and capital, instead of the previous bias that the government had towards, in favor of business. So one of the progressive tendencies was to prevent big business from getting too powerful, especially in terms of working conditions and in terms of the relationship between business and labor. Okay. You also have Roosevelt being, especially in political cartoons, being represented as the enemy of trusts, trust busting. You know what trusts are? These monopolies, these groups, organizations used by big businesses to prevent small businesses from competing with them. So the trust system was something that Roosevelt tried to destroy. And also during his presidency, you witness the beginning of a lot of reforms at the local level, progressive reforms that are going to be continued, of course, by Taft and Wilson. Okay. So this is internally. As far as foreign policy is concerned, Roosevelt, even before becoming president, he was involved militarily in the Spanish-American War. And as a president, he is going to continue and even to go even further in this process of transforming the United States into a world power, getting the United States further gradually through economic, sometimes even military means. For example, you have the Panama Canal. The United States during Roosevelt's presidency, during his time, the U.S. signs the treaty with Panama, the newly independent republic. Yes. So Sam, so you have the Panama Canal is one of the major foreign policy achievements during his presidency. What's the importance of the Panama Canal? The U.S. getting the exclusive right for the exploitation of the Panama Canal gives the United States also access to Asia, through maritime routes and trade. You have his policy, his big stick policy. You know, what is a big stick policy? The United States is going to extend the Monroe Doctrine and not just protect the Western Hemisphere from European intervention, but also the US starts to interfere in the internal affairs of the Western Hemisphere, some countries in the Western Hemisphere. You have during his time and after, you have the US is following the protectorate system. You know what the protectorate system is. So the US, you have Nicaragua, for instance, Panama, you have the Dominican Republic, and so on. Cuba, what happens to these countries? They remain officially and formally independent from the United States, but the US is going to act as a protector for these countries. It means it is there. The US asserts its presence there and makes sure its interests are protected in the area, and makes sure that there aren't any internal conflicts that would threaten its commercial and financial interests. And it uses, sorry? When necessary, there is even troops. There are troops sent to these areas. For example, to Nicaragua, and even to you have even Cuba, for instance. You have the Constitution containing certain elements that give the United States the right to interfere in case the US sees it necessary. Okay, so playing the role of the police of the world. So during Roosevelt is usually associated with the big stick policy. And what does the big stick policy represent? It represents an extension and an expansion also of the Monroe Doctrine, which is a very important development in American foreign policy making. Okay, big stick policy. Usually the term associated with Theodore Roosevelt's foreign policy stance is the Roosevelt's corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. The corollary being the official declaration by Roosevelt that the United States, in case countries of the Western Hemisphere are vulnerable to foreign interference, the United States will have the right to act like an international police. Even before the coming of Roosevelt, you have the US, for example, the US and Venezuela. Yeah, the US acts as an arbitrary between Britain and Venezuela. So you have Europe, Britain representing Europe or the old world, and you have Venezuela, and you have the US acting as an arbitrary between the two. So in the late 1890s, you have also the Spanish-American War, even before the coming of Roosevelt. But what Roosevelt does is he gives a kind of an official declaration of a new stance in American foreign policy making. Okay, and he carries on with the open door policy, because the open door policy came before Roosevelt. It started with McKinley, his predecessor, McKinley, and the same attitude towards China. So Roosevelt is also going to carry on the U.S. interest in China, commercial interest in China, and he is going to provide, to participate, if we can say so, in providing the strategic tools for doing this, especially through the Panama Canal, okay, the Panama Canal Treaty. All right, we last time we discussed, I don't know if we have finished, but I think we started discussing the 1920s. Hopefully we will talk about the 20s and the New Deal, Franklin Roosevelt, Roosevelt's New Deal. Remember what we said, there is a cyclical nature of history and political rivalries and so on. So there's a certain stance, certain ideology in power, in government. And then after a while, when people see that this policy or this approach to policymaking is no longer necessary or no longer beneficial for the society, what happens? It is replaced by its antithesis, if we can say so. So there was a time in the Gilded Age, in the late 19th century, where laissez-faire, where big business power given to big business, financial institutions, and so on, this laissez-faire policy was hurting the United States, the American society, American politics. There was corruption, political machines. As far as the economy is concerned, you have the excessive power of big business and the trust system, the monopoly system, where small businesses did not have the opportunity to grow. You also have, socially speaking, you have the wealth gap that was created. You have, as far as urbanization is concerned, which is usually which usually goes hand in hand with with industrialization. You have the numerous social problems of poverty, the housing problems, the development of slums, the poor living conditions, disease, crime, lack of cleanness. All these resulting from the fact that the industrialization and urbanization processes happened at a very quick pace. They were happening, or they were evolving without an efficient policy to monitor and control them. They were evolving rather spontaneously and in an uncontrolled manner in the Gilded Age, which of course resulted in the many negative side effects. So what happened? There was dissatisfaction with this approach, so it was replaced by the progressive movement, where the government would become a more active, would have a more active role in controlling business, in reducing the side effects, the negative consequences, of course, not eliminating capitalism or industrialization or urbanization, because this wasn't the aim. Americans are usually, American people and American politicians are not how do I say, are usually skeptical about radical ideas. Of course, you are going to have radicals in every era. You will have radical people with radical ideologies, but these are rather the exception than the norm. Okay, so you have progressivism, where government plays a more active role in regulating business. For example, the meat industry, where government imposes certain conditions and regarding the way food is produced and so on. You have the relationship between labor and capital. So the government is going to act as an arbitrary between capital and labor and give labor some air, some space. Okay. Also, the working conditions are going to improve a little bit. Trusts are going to be dissociated with the assertion and affirmation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. It's a Gilded Age measure, but in the progressive era, it's going to be asserted and enforced. Okay, reinforced by the government. Okay. Now, after a while, Americans start to see that this approach to policymaking is no longer necessary, and especially after the war, with the economic impact of the war on the world in general, and the potential for the United States to get out of this economic crisis, because of course the U.S. being neutral, between quotation marks, most of the First World War, I mean, at least geographically distant from the war, meant that the destruction that the war led to in Europe is not going to affect the United States. Okay, so we said that in the 20s, it's going to happen in the 20s, the beginning of the 1920s. The United States is going to get back to business, get back to business as usual. One of the reasons being the division and the Republican, being that the Republicans are now getting back to being pro business, okay, and gradually adapting the progressive attitudes that they had in the early 20th century, to the point where there is there are some people like Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, who is going to carry on his adherence to progressive ideology, which would make him form the Progressive Party and then not be able to carry on because the pro-business faction of the Republican Party is going to assert itself and is going to prove more powerful and more appealing to the American public than the continuation of progressive movement. Why? Because the American public and the electorate were starting to realize that the progressive measures, government intervention in regulating business is no longer useful or necessary. Okay, so how does this change of attitude? Where do you see this change of attitude? You see it in the government's reducing of income tax. What does reducing the income tax mean? More money for the which people? For the wealthy. Because income tax, which category of the society pays more? The rich. Because income tax is usually based on a certain percentage. Therefore, the more money you have, the more you are going to pay. Reducing the income tax would leave more money in the hands of the wealthy. Now, what is the idea? What is the belief behind this? This attitude? Let's not take money from people's pockets through this income tax. Let's take less money. What's the point? Because the belief that these people would use this extra money to invest and, of course, create jobs and to keep the economic machine rolling. Okay, using pro-business tools. For example, Coolidge, before becoming president, Calvin Coolidge, who was a vice president, before becoming vice president, and afterwards president, he used to be a governor of Boston, I think, and he used force to crash a police strike, which means he's already starting to abandon this idea of the government being protecting unions. So crashing a strike means being against these labor activities or unionism, trade unionism, and labor unionism in general. Okay, reducing federal budget, the federal budget, which means when you reduce federal budget, you also reduce federal power. Okay, raising tariffs on imported goods. What is the aim? The aim is to protect local business. So another pro-business measure. Okay, and trade associations. In the past, there used to be trusts, but trusts became illegal. However, in the 20s, there was an alternative to trusts, which is trade associations. Of course, they don't have the same power as trusts. It's not big businesses forming trusts in order to crash small business competition. But here, trade associations, it's associations between between businesses working in the same field, in order for them to be able to improve the economic atmosphere in their favor. So here you have a lot of you have the tendency to be pro-business, to help capitalists and people with capital to invest. Now, this as far as socioeconomic progress is concerned, we said mass production. Maybe the epitome of this development of mass production is Henry Ford and his car industry. What does mass production mean? Mass production means, as far as the economy is concerned, so you have a lot of production. And of course, you have selling and so on, and you also have jobs. Of course, mass production is going to be efficient and reduce the number of maybe not really increase job opportunities, but at least it is going to be a source of income for many people. And mass production also would mean availability of products at low prices. In the mass production system, the products cost less than the traditional system. Okay, what does mass production mean? So one product is not made by the same person from beginning to end. There is a chain. There are chains of production. Each part of the chain is going to be responsible for one small aspect of the production process. And this accelerates production. It means there is productivity. There are more products, more units produced every day before. This means that there is a possibility for reducing prices. Why? Because the costs are being reduced. And what does this mean for the American society? This means the ability to purchase, especially cars. Not only cars. This didn't only apply to cars, but the car can be considered as the epitome or the symbol of this process. Even in literature, I'm sure you saw this in Gatsby, for instance. Okay, and you have the transformation or the shift towards what is called welfare capitalism. What's welfare capitalism? We discussed it. Welfare capitalism is a relationship between business and labor that is not based on exploitation or on interest or material interest, but one that is based on mutual, how do I say, on mutual interest and on cooperation, if we can say so. Henry Ford's philosophy is based on the belief that if a worker is satisfied, if workers are satisfied, they have comfortable working conditions, they have good wages, high wages, they will be more motivated to work harder and to protect the interest of the company, because they will see the company not as something that exploits them, but the company as something that gives them economic and financial power. So what does this mean? This means that the relationship between the workers and capital is going to, in certain circumstances, is going to improve a great deal. You have also these workers would also be consumers, because if you give workers good salaries, that money that you give them is going to get back to the company through them purchasing the products that they themselves produce. Cars, especially that the financial system at this time is going to introduce the sale on credit. You know what sale on credit means? It's like you buy now, pay later. You buy something on credit. Nowadays we call it facilité, okay? Facilité de paiement or something like that. So it was introduced, which means that gradually this middle class, there is a middle class that is growing, okay? And that is going this would encourage consumerism. And this is very important in this era, okay? Consumerism, and this consumerism is going to have some impacts on other areas of the society. One of them being this obsession with consuming not just goods, but also consuming services and consuming ideas and consuming entertainment. The entertainment industry at this time is going to thrive, especially with the evolution of movie theaters and cinema. Okay, even though it isn't as developed as nowadays, but at least there is this tendency to want to spend money on not just on practical goods like home appliances and cars and so on, but also on entertainment. The car itself, the transportation, the ease. And the facilities in transportation with cars and with street cars. Street cars, very much like nowadays le tram et le métro. Okay, you see how you see the impact they have on people's habits, daily habits. It's huge. Okay, at this time, the evolution of transportation would also make it easier for people to travel long distances every day, and therefore to be able to go to areas where there is entertainment. So entertainment is accessible, is more accessible than before due to transportation, due to cars. This consumerism also, and the evolution of the transportation and the entertainment industry is going to have an impact on women, because women are going to become more involved than before, as they are not just going to be producers, because they have already started accessing the workplace. They had already started accessing the workplace in the Gilded Age era. But in the 20s, they are going to become more than just sources of tools of production, workers. They are also going to become consumers. As far as the consumption or consumerism, the phenomenon of consumerism is concerned, women are going to be as enthusiastic consumers as men, or even more, especially in terms of, first in terms of going with the financial freedom that they have with their jobs. They are going to spend that on entertainment, they are going to form clubs, they are going to go out to be more outgoing, and with cars, this would give them access to getting farther and farther from their household, traditional household roles. Okay, so this would encourage them to be more involved in not just the industrial world, but also in this consumer world that had previously been predominated by men. Okay, so you have also with entertainment and with technology, recording. Also, you have cinema, but you also have the development of audio recordings, which would make music accessible to more and more people. And you have and the radio too. Yeah, certainly. And this would make people more, how do I say, more sensitive to some art, musical arts. And as far as the African American community is concerned, you have this cultural revolution, if we can call it so, the Harlem Renaissance. Okay. That you usually see, especially in certain urban areas, cosmopolitan areas, as New York, where you see the development of jazz, for instance. The jazz age, it's called the jazz age for good reason. Okay, and jazz means people are going to be less concerned with hard work, with making money, and more concerned with spending money. So this is what we mean by this consumerism. Okay. One of the consequences this had is that you have also certain phenomenon of this alienation that certain writers are going to have, because there are many thinkers and writers, especially novelists and poets, who are going to have a more skeptical attitude towards these changes. A good example being Fitzgerald. Maybe he would write later, but it's in reaction to what's going on in this era, the 20s. You have some writers who are going to witness that the American society, their society, is becoming too obsessed with entertainment, too obsessed with materialism, too obsessed with consumerism. And they feel that the American society was changing too quickly and in a way that would make it abandon its values of hard work, of individualism, and thrift, and so on. Okay. Now, this era also witnesses, some. This is also the era of some issues as far as the American political scene is concerned. One of them being prohibition. This is the era of the prohibition movement. It's also called the prohibition era. We said as a reaction to what was going on, There are some Americans who are going to be skeptical about the impact of this consumerist culture on the American society, especially women who are going to be involved in the 1920s version of the temperance movement. Do you remember temperance movement? The temperance movement. What's the temperance movement? It's a reform movement led by American women that aims at eliminating the impact of alcoholism on the American society. Now, you say prohibition, prohibiting the selling and production of, the trade in alcoholic drinks, in liquor. Now, what does this have to do with this era? Because this is the era of consumerism and so on. This is also the era where women start to be more powerful than before, because they have already had the right to vote, okay, in 1920, so at the beginning of the era. Now, what does this have to do with prohibition? Prohibition is usually associated with female reform movements because it is usually women who suffer, especially married women, who suffer from domestic violence as a result of alcoholism. And therefore, they are the ones who are going to be interested in preventing these consequences from happening in the society. And therefore, you are going to see the impact of the temperance movement. You have temperance movement in the 1840s, before the Civil War, and you also have you have the same thing in the progressive era, which is going to result in the Prohibition Amendment. So this era is going to witness the government prohibiting the selling and the buying of alcoholic drinks. Now, what does this mean? We said that this is the result of some reform movements, usually led by women, who were fed up with domestic violence, who were fed up with their husbands, especially their husbands acting in very aggressive and hostile manners at home as a result of drinking. What does this mean for this era? Sorry? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But what impact is this going to have on the American society? Sorry? Not the economy, socially speaking. Socially and even legally speaking. You're going to have equality. But prohibition. Talking about prohibition. Prohibiting the selling and buying of alcohol. This is going to lead to the development of gangsters or gangs. Crime. As a reaction to this, there are many people who are going, especially those who are involved in the production and selling of alcohol, who are going to form mobs or organized crime. So you see, the era is the evolution of organized crime, and I'm sure you have seen one or two movies about. I don't remember the titles. One involving Johnny Depp as in the cast.
Public Enemy.
Public Enemy, yeah, Public Enemy, and you also, yeah.
I forgot his name.
Yeah.
There's another one called American Gangster starring Denzel Washington. But
Denzel
was in the 1970s.
No. There is one, Hardy. What's the name of the actor? Hardy?
Tom Hardy.
There is one involving Tom Hardy, another one with Johnny Depp as the cast, as members of, I think, of the cast, that talk about this era of prohibition, especially the one with Tom Hardy. I don't remember the title, but I think it's Outlaw or...
Yes.
Outlaw?
Yes.
Outlaw, yeah. So you have the organization of illegal trade and the bootlegging, practices. Bootlegging is like, when someone puts something, hides something in their boots. It's a symbol of the smuggling and illegal trading and selling of liquor, and also under, if we can say underground, not really underground, but underground meaning not visible to government authorities, bars and so on. So people are going to challenge the government, and they are going to carry on selling and buying liquor in an illegal manner, and this is going to lead to the evolution of organized crime and mobs. Okay, so this is an era of this is what one of the things that the era is famous for. You also have a very interesting demographic change of this era. This demographic change resulting from internal migration, internal movement of population, and also the coming of immigrants from abroad. Internally speaking, remember the Jim Crow laws, the end of the Reconstruction, going back to segregation, racism, white supremacy, the KKK in the South. This is going to push many African Americans to look for opportunities, north. And maybe one of the most visible consequences of this is the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance happens in the North, not in the South. It's the African American musical and cultural revolutions of this era are going to happen in the North, which means that the African American population of the North is going to increase in size. There are more and more people, more and more African Americans who are going to migrate from the South to the North looking for more job opportunities, for better atmosphere, for better living and working conditions, for less racism and less risk for their lives because of this, because the South was being associated with racism and white supremacy. Now the question is, with this great migration, do these African Americans witness better living conditions, more welcoming, more tolerant atmosphere in the North? This is relative. And what's going to happen, one of the things that are going to happen is that the North, in many instances, in many areas, African Americans are going to realize that the North is not less racist than the South. It's just the only difference had been that there are more African Americans or former slaves in the South than in the North. Therefore, racism can be materialized, can be visible. You cannot know whether someone, person X or Y, is racist or not if you don't put them in juxtaposition with people from another ethnic group. It's only when they are in the same environment that you can test whether or not they are racist. Therefore, this great migration process made many African Americans realize, and many Americans realize, that the North is not as immune to racism as it had claimed to be. And this is going to create other issues related to race relations, to race riots, and so on. And besides, so you already have this great migration of African Americans to the North, and you also have the already existing process, the already ongoing process of migration or immigration of people from outside the United States to America. And in this era, the 20s, you have it's not the emergence, but the strengthening and the spread of anti-immigration feelings and white supremacy. The era of the 1920s is going to witness the rise, not the emergence, but the rise of the power of white supremacists, such groups as the KKK, the White League, okay, this anti-immigration sentiment in the United States. And this is going to lead to legislation by the government that would aim at controlling the immigration process. Immigration control legislation in 1921 and 1924, which is, of course, going to result from the some white Americans' resistance to immigration. In one of the things, now the question is, what is the association between prohibition and immigration control? What's the relationship between prohibition and immigration control? Americans are going to associate alcoholism with certain groups of immigrants. They're going to say, this alcohol thing or problem, this drinking problem, is the result of the invasion of our society by, most of the time it's going to be related to Catholics, Irish Catholics, okay, being considered heavy drinkers, okay. So one of the things, one of the tendencies that is going to accompany the prohibition, the anti-alcohol stance is going to be this anti-immigration feeling that associates some moral problems and moral issues like alcoholism and other things, of course, to certain ethnic groups, even though members of this movement would themselves get involved in drinking and so on. Okay, so this immigration control is also going to be associated with the Americanization process. What do you mean by this? We mean that Americans are going to, many Americans, especially white Americans, are going to start and try to impose certain conditions on people coming to the United States. One of these conditions is that if you want to live in the United States, you have to be Americanized first. You have to adopt American ways, the American way of life, speak English, and act and adopt American values in order to be fit to live in the American society, which means that there is going to be a kind of resistance to foreign cultures, especially when these foreign cultures are going to come to the United States and to form in ethnic enclaves. What are ethnic enclaves? You hear of the word Chinatown a lot. Chinatowns, there are many Chinatowns. Okay, Little Italy, and so on. So what are these? These are areas where Americans, there are American citizens or their descendants, American citizens who either immigrated from other countries, or who are the descendants of those people who immigrated from other countries. Sorry. A good example is, I think you can see this in, what's the movie? Gangs of New York?
Yeah.
Yeah, a good example. Gangs of New York. See how these people from different areas of the world who come to the United States, and they and their descendants or their children are going to live in the United States, while at the same time they are going to stick to the values of their home country, which means that many Americans, especially white Americans, are going to see that the American society is being transformed. It means there are many values, many traditions, many customs, eating habits, and languages, even languages that are going to spread in the United States and that are transforming the American society. Very much like what you see in Fox News nowadays when they talk about immigrants. They say, this is not the America we know and love anymore. What is the America they know and love? It's white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant America, okay? So this Americanization tendency or process where some Americans, some extremist Americans are going to try to impose on immigrants in return for accepting them in the American society, to be Americanized, okay? If you want to live in America, you have to adopt American values. You cannot live here and speak Italian or speak Chinese, or especially vis-a-vis Asians, okay? Remember the Chinese Exclusion Act of the Gilded Age. At this time, you witness an increase in this anti-Asian feeling, okay? So you have the rise of this white supremacy can be seen in a movie called The Birth of a Nation, okay? What does this movie do? It portrays, or it gives an image, or it creates a scene, tries to spread a scene or an impression or an image that glorifies the KKK, okay? That presents the situation of the emergence of the KKK like a situation where there is very much like Jim Crow things, okay? A situation where you have conspiracy between African Americans who are represented as being inferior, being dumb, being greedy, being lazy, and so on, with their white friends, sympathizers, against the Southern society. It's like an attempt to destroy the Southern society through this conspiracy between African Americans, okay, usually referred to with the N-word, and their white sympathizers, especially in remember the Reconstruction era? The Reconstruction era, what happened in the Reconstruction era? So you have the African Americans, the newly freed slaves, and you have the Republicans who are involved in the Reconstruction process. During the 20s, there is a kind of, if we can say, revisionism or revisionist portrayal of the era. And I don't know if we can have Birth of a Nation. No connection. Anyway, try to check Birth of a Nation online, okay? So the presentation of the KKK as knights, as heroes, as saviors of the Southern society from this conspiracy. So you see here, this era, one of the paradoxes of this era is that even though it's the era of economic prosperity and progress, it's also the era of racism and anti-immigration, okay? So in the past, the KKK members used to act underground, if we can say so, undercover. But in this era, in the 20s, they are going to come to the surface, and you even see rallies. You see rallies of KKK members in the streets, which means that they are open about their adherence to this to white supremacy and to these racist attitudes. Okay? Yes? Now, so very much like the Gilded Age, the 20s, the era of the 20s, is also going to see some issues, especially at the end, some issues which are going to lead to make people call for change, Now, what did you say about the Gilded Age? You have gilded, it means it's golden at the, but underneath there are issues. Now, during the 20s, you don't have exactly the same problems of the Gilded Age. You don't have this notion of exploitation or working conditions or living conditions, because the 20s is an era where there is some economic prosperity, financial prosperity, where many Americans, where the middle class starts to grow. It means many Americans become financially more comfortable than before, okay? Where it's the era of entertainment, the era of the Harlem Renaissance and Cultural Revolution. It's the era where women get more financial and social independence and freedom. But like anything else related to capitalism, one of the issues with capitalism is that in spite of all the benefits, the financial and professional benefits it has, it always comes with high risks. You have seen this before the Civil War in the 1820s, and in the 1873 and the 1890s. So you have these financial recessions and economic recessions, and then depression. They are always the result of the fact that capitalism, especially financial capitalism, if uncontrolled, it might lead to abrupt changes, catastrophes that would lead to bankruptcy of for many people. Now, the 20s is the era of prosperity, the era of the growth, climbing the social ladder, if we can say so. It's the era of mass production, which means that people are have more financial power, purchasing power. They can buy, especially with the selling or buying on credit system, with the credit system. This would make many Americans able to afford certain goods that had been difficult for them to obtain in the past. And there is an important economic aspect of the era, which is the financial institutions, banks. When people have jobs and when people have salaries, especially if they have some job security, some stable salaries, what do? They say, okay, now I have a salary. I can get credit from banks. And also, many Americans become interested in getting involved in stocks, the stock exchange, buying and selling stocks. So in order to invest their capital, their money, the money they have from salaries and so on, what do? They get involved in this stock exchange, buying and selling of stocks. It becomes a very lucrative, very profitable economic activity. Sometimes when the middle class people, when ordinary people do not have enough money to invest in stocks, what do? They borrow from banks. So you have this consumerist era, and this materialism of the era is going to lead to a kind of hysteria, if we can say so, hysteria, economic and financial hysteria, where many people are going to get involved in this stock exchange, in the stock market. What does this mean for these people? It might mean an opportunity for getting rich very quickly. So this notion of getting rich very quickly is going to be attractive to many Americans. But at the same time, it comes with high risks. It means if you borrow a lot of money from the bank and then you invest them in stocks, the amount of profit you are going to make will always depend on the prices of the stocks you are going to buy. It means in case the stocks prices go low, especially if they do so very quickly, there is going to be a problem. You are not going to be able to get benefit and profit from those stocks, and therefore you are going to become unable to pay your debts, and you know the resulting consequences. So even though there was progress, but this progress came with a price, and this price is going to be seen in the Great Depression, in the 1929 financial crash and the following depression. Do you need a short break? You need a short break? No? Okay, we have just half an hour left. So we said that the economy, even though there is some economic progress and financial progress, it is based on shaky foundations. What do you mean by these shaky foundations? We mean that the wealth, especially the financial wealth, that is being created is not controlled. It is too spontaneous. Banks at this time, because of the, remember, pro-business attitude of the new political party, banks and the financial institutions are going to have too much freedom. And when they are given too much freedom, when they are not controlled, they can get people involved in certain, how do I say, in certain situations, certain financial problems. How is that? Now, when the banks issue banknotes and so on, they usually do this, especially with currency. They usually do this in relationship to the gold, how much gold they have in their vaults, how much gold the bank has. So money, the value of money is usually measured, or a currency of any country is usually measured against how much gold, the quantity of gold, the gold standard and so on, the quantity of gold that this bank has. But the problem with banks is that they were issuing more, they were given more than they had in terms of gold. This is very complex financial system. You should perhaps do some reading about it. But what matters here is that there is much wealth that is not wealth, I mean financial wealth. There is much money, paper money, that is not matched by material wealth. This material wealth can be gold, but it can also be production, products, and so on. So it's very much what happens in inflation, for example. Remember one African, I don't know if it's Mozambique, in order to solve some economic problems, I think it's Zimbabwe or Mozambique, 3 or 4 years ago. What happened is that in order to solve the economic problem, what did they do? They printed money. So this is the problem with the financial institutions. There is more money printed, and this money is not matched by production or gold, by the material wealth. And therefore, the value of the currency is going to decrease a great deal. Something similar is going to happen with the banks, okay? So this would gradually lead to the creation, going back of the wealth gap, because there are a lot of people who are going to enrich themselves through these stocks, and therefore to get much wealthier than the rest of the society, okay? And one of the major aspects of this era and major problems of this era is that most of the people who are going to benefit from this economic progress and development are people living in urban areas or involved in financial and industrial practices. Farmers are not going to benefit much from this system. It means, when you say farmers, it means it's an important segment of the American society that is left out, if we can say so. Okay? Again, very much like the Gilded Age era, when you have prosperity, when you have demand on goods, what is this going to lead? When you have mass production also, this usually leads to overproduction. And remember, when we say production, when we talk about production and companies, remember that at this time we said there is also the stocks. So these companies are owned by stockholders. And who are these stockholders? You will have many people being involved in buying stocks from these companies. This means that for anyone to profit from stocks, from shares of a company, the company has to do well economically. And with this mass production system, with this increase of productivity and so on, you will have overproduction. What does overproduction mean? It means there are more goods, more products, there is more offer than needed or than demand. And this is good normally. You say, oh, this is good because people can buy goods at low prices, okay? But these people who are going to buy goods at low prices, they are also workers in companies. And if you work in a company and then the products your company sells decrease in prices, your company will make less profit. If your company will make less profit, there is a risk of you losing your salary, losing your job. If not having salary cuts, reducing of salaries. Also, there is something else. Even if you are a worker or you are a manager in a company, you have also borrowed money to invest maybe in your company through buying shares or stocks, or in another company. And if you have shares or stocks in a company, and then this company, because of overproduction and reduction of prices, this company might go bankrupt or might lose, it means you are not going to make profit. You're also going to lose as a shareholder or as a stockholder, okay? So you already have this overproduction, which means reducing prices. And reducing prices means less profit for companies. And less profit for companies means if a company does not make much profit, what's it going to do? It's going to reduce the costs of production, including salaries, including some people being fired from their jobs as a way of compensating for the loss in profit. Then you also have, especially in the middle class, you have credit card and loan system, or credit, buying on credit. What does buying on credit mean? It means that you are going to buy goods through the credit system, and you're not going to pay immediately. You are going to pay gradually. What is your guarantee? Your only guarantee to pay is maintaining your job. How can you pay if you buy on credit? How can you pay? You must have a job and a salary, permanent salary. And with the unemployment problem, with this overproduction problem, and the problem of factories and companies losing profit, you are going to become unable to pay the loans, okay? Which leads to, and also bank loans, taking loans from the bank in order to buy a house or to buy a car or, and so on. Okay? So all these issues related to overproduction, the wealth gap, the people getting immersed, getting entangled in this financial mechanism and system, especially the stock market, is going to be visible in the financial crisis that is going to be seen in the stock market, and the panic, the crash, the financial crash of 1999 is going to be the culmination, the embodiment of what we said in terms of the economy being built on shaky foundations. It means on uncontrolled, and also unguaranteed, how do I say, considerations, because this is what capitalism is about. Now, what does this mean? What does this mean? So you have the stock market crash of 1929. You can check YouTube for documentaries. There are many interesting documentaries about the crash and the resulting devastation and consequences on many Americans. Okay, even though not all Americans, or maybe not the majority of Americans, were involved in stock exchange, but the impact was visible on everyone, because almost everyone who was involved in industry, in terms of workers and so on, was, in the capitalist system, all aspects of the economy, all sectors of the economy are interconnected. If a problem happens anywhere, it's going to have an impact on people in all other areas. So the crash of 1929 is going to be followed by the decade of depression called the Great Depression, where you have financial problems, where many people are going to be jobless, people below poverty level, especially farmers. If you look at the pictures, historical pictures, you're going to see people even maybe in the late 19th century and also in the Great Depression, people being obliged, families, especially farmers, selling their kids. You see this. There are some pictures of families offering their kids for sale because they were unable to feed them, and they would use the money in selling their kids to get out of their financial and economic problems. Okay, so what do you think would happen? What's the natural reaction? The natural reaction is, again, change. Let's go back to some, maybe not progressivism, but to something that looks like it. So this is going to convince many Americans that perhaps the reason why, even nowadays, by the way, even nowadays, the question, what are the major causes of the Great Depression or the stock market crash? There is disagreement over the main. Maybe what are the causes as a list? It's not a big deal. But the major cause or causes of the Great Depression, historians still disagree over what really caused the Great Depression. So you're not going to find one answer. This usually depends on perhaps the ideology of the people discussing the issue. Okay? Now, as a reaction to this, you naturally going to expect the American society, American people, and some political members of a political elite to welcome the coming back of some government control of the economy, of some government regulation, because this is what big businesses have done to us. So who is going to protect us from the damages that have been caused by this financial and economic system, the prosperity between quotation marks? It's normally you would expect people to call for going back to government intervention. Okay. So when things are okay, government, please step aside. Let us prosper. Let us buy cars. Let us enjoy our lives. Let the economy roll. Let the economic machine work on its own. Don't interfere. Don't try to regulate. Don't try to block things. But then when there is a crisis, when there is a problem, people are going to get back to calling for government intervention. And this is what leads to the era of the New Deal, okay? Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal. Now, before we get into the New Deal, what do you think the New Deal is going to be about? What does it have in common with the progressive era? So the government being having a more active role again, okay? The government not as the symbol of authority and oppression, but the government as a symbol of security and financial, especially financial and social and socio-economic security, because the ease, the prosperity, the boom, the economic boom of the 20s was like a, it was like a, how do I say? It was much like a bulb or something that exploded very quickly. Therefore, people were looking for, they were no longer concerned, most Americans are no longer concerned with luxuries, with entertainment, they are more concerned with safety, economic and professional or social safety. It's like to just the ability to be above the poverty level, because you'll have many people going bankrupt as a result of the Great Depression, okay? So the New Deal. So we expect the New Deal to involve more government control, more government intervention. What else? Reforms, okay? Well, at this time, the New Deal is maybe one of the differences between the New Deal and the Progressive Era. Is that the Progressive Era, you can see it more as reforms involving many parties. Whereas the New Deal, it's rather a political program, or sorry, an economic and social and even a financial program implemented by the government in order to minimize, at least minimize, the damages of the Great Depression, and also to help the American society get back on its feet, okay? Now, so the New Deal government, how is the government going to get involved? How do you think the government is going to get involved? So you have another Roosevelt, FDR, another pro-government, pro-federal government, Roosevelt, FDR, who is going to be the leader of this change, New Deal measures. So the New Deal is based on the changing role of the government. Instead of, you know, the 1920s attitude of the government being just there to watch and to monitor and to help business grow and to provide an atmosphere for industrial and financial institutions, big business, to grow and thrive, and therefore to help the American society do so. The government now has the role of trying to rescue the economy and rescue the society from the devastating impacts of the Great Depression. So you have you have one of the axes, one of the areas where government is going to be more active and more involved is the economy and employment. There are many acronyms. This is the era of acronyms. You have many acronyms and abbreviations in this era. There are many institutions and committees that are formed by the government in order to rescue the economy. So you can check these out online for more details. So we are just going to use them as representative of this tendency to be more accepting and more welcoming of government intervention again. So the government is being involved in the economy and employment. In the 20s, the government was following a laissez-faire, hands-off policy. Leave business for its own. Reduce income taxes. Don't tax people. Don't tax the rich. Let people invest their own money in stock markets and so on. Banks, there are financial institutions becoming too powerful, uncontrolled. Leave them for themselves. Don't bother them, okay? Now, with the New Deal era, the government or the president, FDR, is going to call for more government involvement in the economy and also in employment. What's the difference? Why? How did employment used to go before in the 20s? Employment was based on a company's need for workers. Investment, capital investment, industrialization. What does this mean? This means that there is need for workers to keep the industrial process going on. So recruitment was done in a spontaneous and uncontrolled way. But at this time, with the New Deal, the government is going to take the responsibility of providing people with employment. Not like in the past, where employment, the government would rely on big businesses to employ workers. If a person has capital, enough money to invest, they are going to invest it in production, and therefore they are going to need workers, and people are going to have jobs, and this is organic, this is spontaneous, this is without the need for government intervention. With the New Deal, the attitude is going to change. The government is going to be involved in the economy and in employment. And you have examples of legislation, okay? So you have the Agricultural Adjustment Act. Remember that farmers, whenever there is a financial crisis, farmers are among the first to, are among the people who suffer the most. And usually they are the first to take the blow. The National and Industrial Recovery Act. So you see the word recovery here. So to revive the industry. Works Progress Administration. Works Progress Administration, which is going to facilitate the government, or to give the government the ability to employ a lot of people. And these, you see, these measures or these legislations are going to, what they have in common is that there are mechanisms, political and legislative mechanisms, by which the government is going to get involved in trying to provide people with job opportunities, to revive the economy, to revive, to protect farmers, okay? And to also protect labor, because remember in the 20s there was this skepticism about labor unions, because which was in the 20s, remember, prohibition, we said alcoholism was associated with certain foreign groups, between quotation marks. Also labor unionism during the 20s was associated with foreign influence. It's like this labor unionism, and especially the radical versions of it, are associated with foreign influence. This ideology, we are capitalists, we are a nation of economic liberalism. And labor unionism is a threat to economic liberalism. This is the 20s. Also, remember we said the anti-immigration feeling? It associated labor ideology, especially radical forms of labor unionism, with foreign influence. Therefore, the resistance to labor movement and to labor ideologies in general was a result, was accompanying the anti-immigration feeling. So we have the National Labor Relations Act is going to facilitate, to give the government the opportunity to at least protect labor workers, labor unions from too powerful business leaders. Okay. Another area was in finance and social security. So you have, as a result of the financial crash of 1929, it became clear that in the future, okay, in the future, Americans would always be skeptical, scared of taking risks, of taking financial risks. Why? Because in the future, they will always be afraid of facing the same fate of the 1929 financial crash. Also, you have people losing their jobs and so on. So this means that the people are going to need something that would make them more comfortable, feel more secure financially and socially. It means that people should, in the future, Americans should feel that the risk of losing their money, their entire money overnight, or losing their entire livelihood and job overnight, is going to be reduced. So you have the finance, the field of financial and social security. You also have certain legislations that are going to be issued in order to provide people with some kind of safety net, especially vulnerable people. Okay, so you have the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, so insurance. Okay, so you have at this time in the United States the implementation of insurance policies. Okay. Railroad Retirement Act, so when people retire, so if you give people some pension, retirement pension, this provides them with some financial security, okay? Securities and Exchange Commission, and also the social, maybe one of the most important ones, being the Social Security Act of 1935. So all these are in the early or mid-1930s, okay? So you have the Railroad Retirement Act, the RRA, okay. And now then, so you have these elements. Then there is also another question, because people who lose their jobs, okay, people who lose their jobs in factories, you might say we can revive the economy again, and factories and production is going to get back on its feet again, and these people, the people with this experience, are going to get their jobs back. Now, how about artists? How about writers? How about historians? They say, I don't know, there's a saying, I think, that in an economic crisis, historians are the first ones to lose their jobs because they are the least needed. Okay. I don't know if it's historians and novelists or historians and painters or something like that. Now, how is the government going to help those people? Because those people are they are American citizens. They have families to feed. Okay. So, in terms of art and culture, the government is going to create projects sponsored by the government, where these people are going to have the opportunity to have jobs. So you have an example is the Federal Writers Project, where people are going to be employed in order, for example, to do, let's say, a historian would be, the government would say, okay, you're a historian or a teacher or whatever. I think we need your expertise. We need you to do a historical research and to write historical books, to write books about American history. Go to the South, for instance, interview people in the South, ask them questions about the Civil War era, and so on. Very much like in Algeria, for instance, you have some historians doing research through asking eyewitnesses about the Algerian Revolution and so on. It happens in every country. The Works Project Administration also, for example, painters and artists would be paid for decorating, for example, train stations. And nowadays, you go to airports or to train stations in Algeria or in any part of the world. Sometimes you have big artistic paintings and so on. These are made by artists. In the United States, the government did something similar in order to provide these people with opportunities for having a job and therefore having a salary. So what's the government doing by this? This is a good example to illustrate the tendency of this era, the political tendency of the FDR. So the government would create projects, even if these projects are not economically or financially profitable, but the government would only do so in order to justify helping people. Because American culture, the American way of thinking, especially American citizens, they are skeptical about being given money from the government directly, like charity. And this is something just American. So in order for the government to be able to sponsor this social security, in order to be able to rescue people, spend money and rescue people, the government would create projects. Sometimes they are artistic or academic projects that might not have a direct economic benefit, but they are used as a justification for giving monies, sponsoring people, for helping people get out of their economic crisis. Now, the other justification might be that if you give people money, they are going to become able to buy products. If they are able to buy products, companies and factories can reopen, and therefore the economy can start rolling again. You also have the government is going to start building public works projects. What do you mean by this? The government is going to, at this time, it's going to be very actively involved in building bridges and dams, water dams and roads. And these big projects are going to be used for two reasons. One reason being that they are going to be used as infrastructures, because if you want the economy to revive, the economy cannot thrive and cannot be revived without transportation, without energy, without infrastructures. And most of the time, these infrastructures are huge, they are big. And since you don't have the private sector is suffering economically and financially, you have no one to take responsibility. So the government is going to use these public projects, les travaux publics, like in Algeria, building roads and bridges and so on, in order to first provide the economy with infrastructures, provide the American society with infrastructures necessary for economic recovery, and at the same time to use these projects as an opportunity for employing, for providing people with jobs and opportunities for financial recovery. Okay. So now the question is, this is a good thing, isn't it? The government is doing good so far. It's helping people. It's creating projects. Even artists and historians who might be considered as unnecessary jobs, are given the opportunity to have a salary through giving them through charging them with decorating and painting public areas. Now, from the American perspective, what might be the problem with this? Is there going to be any objection to this in the United States?
Probably.
Certainly.
Yeah.
On what foundation? What is the problem with this? You have the national government, the federal government. The society is the society, and many people, many companies have gone bankrupt. There's economic crisis. There is poverty. There is distress. There is depression. And in order to help the economy recover, the government might need to interfere. What might be the problem with this? Okay, let's say hate. Okay, if you hate government intervention, are you just going to say, hey, listen, my fellow American citizens, I hate government intervention. And then they're going to say, less freedom? Mm-hmm.
Capitalists won't like that.
Mm-hmm. How do these restrict business?
Capitalists.
But how does all this restrict business? In what way? You might have some businesses saying, oh, this is yeah, this might be good at the beginning, but later on, if things get better, it might have been too late for us, because we will have already lost much of our economic power to the government.
Yes.
Maybe, yeah, but are they going to say this? If you say this to the American public at this time, remember, the American society now is suffering at this era. They're suffering from poverty. They don't care about big business. They care to be able to get above the poverty level. The opposition, remember, is going to be based on one question or one issue. Does the government have the constitutional power to do so? Because remember, the federal government in America and the state governments, the division of the powers between the two, which powers should be reserved to the states and which ones should be reserved to the federal government, this is usually debate related to the Constitution. If there is a question, does the federal government have the right to do so? What is the reference to answer this question? The reference is the Constitution. So opposition is going to come from the Supreme Court, the judicial branch of the government. So you have here executive and judicial branch disagreeing. This opposition is going to be based on the government's role. The government's role normally is not to interfere in the economy as far as the Constitution is concerned. So another question is, how is the government going to finance those New Deal programs? Because if you say build projects and give people money and so on and so forth, the question is, where is the government going to get the money from? You cannot invent money. Maybe you can print money, but this is dangerous. This means that they are going to tax the rich, okay? Taxing the rich and selling bonds. The American government usually sells bonds. What do you mean by bonds? For example, in wartime, during war, the government tells people, hey, we need your money to sponsor the war. Then people are going to say, yeah, how am I going to get it back? The government says, I'll give you a bond. I'll give you like kimbialat in Arabic, in Egyptian Arabic. It means wasl. It means this is a testimony note that proves that you have lent money to the government, and the government owes you. In the past, it was called IOU. I owe you something, IOUs. Okay, so bonds. So the government owes you money. So when the government recovers, you will get money. And this is risky, because if I give you $20 now, in 10 years or in 5 years, those $20 might not be worth the same. Okay, so this is one of the issues. Taxing the rich also. Taxing the rich is a problem. There is also even opposition, bipartisan opposition to the New Deal, to the president's New Deal from the American Liberty Party, okay, from Democrats and Republicans, who are going to cooperate against these measures. Consider them okay. So okay, I think we should stop here, because I'm sure some of you might need to. So I have criticism from different sides. I think you can see all this in in the video. I shared the video